How do you feel about playing music by memory? Do you feel at ease when you're at home playing through a song? Do you enjoy to move your fingers without thinking about it? Are you able to lean back and enjoy this process? Or do you get frustrated if you make the same mistakes over and over again and certain passages seem really hard to memorize? What about playing in front of an audience? Do you enjoy the process of entering the stage without a note stand? Or do you get stage fright if you enter the stage and you're not sure if you will be able to make it through the performance? Well, welcome back to AccordionAcademy.com. My name is Matthias Matzke, and in the next 3 videos I want to talk about playing music by memory. I think playing music by heart is a goal for both teachers and students. So usually it's one of the final steps if you prepare a song that you're finally able to perform it without the notes. Still, doing that seems to be a huge obstacle even for professional musicians who struggle with memorizing music. So for lots of musicians, it's a trauma that was caused in the childhood because you entered the stage once, you weren't really prepared for playing by heart, and just because you thought you were able to perform a song by heart and it went well when you practiced it, you entered the stage, suddenly you started thinking about a couple of things, and in the worst case, you had a blackout and you had to stop the performance. Then you think for the rest of your life, well, playing by heart, that's for the geniuses, it's not for me, I don't have that talent or whatever. But that just ignores the fact that in most of the times, people aren't really prepared for playing by memory because there are so many strategies that we will discuss in these series of videos, so many strategies that you can individually, for you personally, select for your way of learning these things by heart. And not necessarily every strategy is for everybody and not necessarily for every kind of music. So most people play through a song as many times until it finally feels comfortable to play it and they don't think about it anymore and they think they're able to perform it. And then they enter the stage and there wasn't really a process of memorizing the song. And you run a huge risk of either winning and getting through the performance or losing and running on one of these difficulties that you had when you learned the song, and you kind of ignored it in your practicing process, but no one really told you. So I was quite lucky because as a child, playing by heart seemed to be the right strategy for myself. I was always very confident when I just practiced the song often enough, and my fingers always found their way. So I created a habit that playing by heart is good for me and I can do it. Until there was a certain time in my life when I realized that I started to think more about playing by memory, and when I felt insecure because I didn't know enough about the music, or I thought more about the certain situations on stage that started to scare me. So the solution was to think more about individual ways to memorize music for myself. It was a huge self-experience, and due to that self-knowledge, I'm now able to prepare songs in ways that help me to get more security in the performance, and I'd like to share that with you. So in general, I discovered 3 strategies for learning songs by heart. In this first video, we'll be talking about the so-called muscle or finger memory. The muscle memory is what I also call the autopilot. If you're able to play something just because your fingers find the right way without thinking about it. And that's, in most of the times, the strategy that most people apply unconsciously. So I can tell you, everybody practices with some of these strategies that I will be presenting, some consciously, some unconsciously. If you're unconsciously practicing with the right strategies, that's good. Still, you can improve your whole efficiency by applying the other strategies as well. If you're unconsciously practicing with the wrong strategy, that may be the reason why you always thought playing by heart is not for me, improvisation is not for me, all these kinds of things which form an unnecessary bad habit in your brain. First type, the muscle memory. Just one more bracket. There is something that I call an old school way of learning things, not only music but also vocabulary. And maybe you know this attitude from school where some teachers tell you to simply write down a vocabulary 10 times or say it often enough until you're able to remember it. That's an old school way to learn vocabulary. Modern brain research found more efficient ways, which are like getting a personal link to the word you want to remember, linking it to an emotion, and applying it in the right way, not learning it that isolated. And that's exactly the same thing with music. So if you just play through a song, you move your fingers, you're not really emotionally and mentally involved in what you're doing, then this is what I consider as this old school way of learning music, which isn't always the most efficient way. Let's talk about these two other strategies. The second one is what I call the analytical understanding. That means you analyze music and you reconstruct it when you play it. It's kind of feeling like you're having a dialogue with a composer. Now, this can be a lot of things. It can be music theory and theoretical analysis, but it can also be emotional analysis. How do you feel when you play certain passages? It can be characters, it can be colors, it can be so many things that you find in other layers than just the note layers on how to hit the right notes with your fingers. All this is an analysis and a reconstruction. So once I have analyzed a piece, say I analyzed the music theory and I'm able to sit down with a pencil and a sheet of music paper, I would be able to write down all these notes just because I know what the composer did there. I know the rules of compositions. I know how this certain piece of music was constructed. So this is one strategy within this whole second block of analyzing music that I could apply to memorize music. That seems a little difficult. When we talk about it in this tutorial, you realize that there's a lot of very practical things that are a lot of fun and that aren't just theoretical hard work. And the third type of playing by heart is what I consider as playing by ear. This is the one that most people use as an excuse, like, well, I don't have these listening skills, this is for geniuses only, I can't use this, I can't do it, and most people simply never trained it. Playing by ear can mean that you either have the complete freedom, that the link between your ear and your brain to the fingers is so fast that you have an imagination of what you want to play and you find the right ways for your fingers on the keyboard, or that you have a piece of music and you sit down in silence and you transcribe this piece of music. So it's just two ways. One is more spontaneous and the other one is also more with preparation. With all these three types of memorizing music, there's advantages, there is dangers, there is application fields that I recommend, and then there's a methodology on how to practice these types. And we'll go through all these aspects for each of these types. In the end, it's also very important to know that these types influence each other and there's a strong connection between those. So knowing that these different types exist, I can find with a little bit of self-experience the way of combining these strategies during my practicing process that brings the most efficiency to me. If you have only worked with one of them and you now start with the others, you will be surprised how much more you can learn about music and how much efficiency you will discover soon. Let us start with the muscle memory now. First of all, the advantages of the muscle memory, and one of the huge advantages is it's a lot of fun simply letting go, disconnecting your brain from your fingers and being sure that your fingers will find the right keys if you practice with the strategies for muscle memory. That brings a lot of enthusiasm to you and it's simply fun. It's a strategy to practice most of the fast runs, it's a strategy for whole fast pieces, whole songs. And if you apply it correctly, you will be surprised how much you can do at ease. Just like a robot, if you programmed your fingers in the right way and they will perform the task that you practiced. Second huge advantage of the muscle memory is it gives you a lot of possibilities in terms of stage performance. And here I'd like to compare two types of musicians. Say one is a rock musician who always plays the same licks, riffs, because the song has to be performed in the way the audience knows it. When this musician enters the stage, he perfectly knows what he's going to do and he has huge playing routine in his task. So he will be able to dance on the stage, he can connect with the audience in a way, he can flirt with his other musicians on stage, because he doesn't have to focus so much on playing his instrument correctly. That is because he practiced everything in a routine, and he practiced everything into the muscle memory. That rock musician compared to a jazz musician, for example, will look like this, that the jazz musician is more in his inner world. He doesn't have that active stage performance. The jazz musician will connect in a different way to the audience. If you look at improvisers, for example, they oftentimes close their eyes, they don't move a lot, and you can tell that their brain is very actively thinking, and they don't have the capacity to dance on the stage because they have to focus on finding the right music for that very moment. Not that one is better than the other, but you can see these different types of application fields just comparing the routine way of playing music to that way of music where you're more in the moment and you have to think a little more. Then a huge advantage that is related to that is the communication. If you want to control timing issues, for example, you have to let go controlling the future actions that you want to do on stage. Say if you play a run and you're focused on, I have to hit these keys now, you can't really control what the other musicians on stage are doing. However, if you know that this run is already a routine, you can let go, your fingers will find the way, and you can control what the other musicians are doing, you can connect with them, and it simply links the whole performance better. Also, you have the possibility to connect a little with the audience if music is in your finger memory. And connecting to the audience is sometimes very dangerous because the audience may distract you. Imagine there is somebody in the audience that is very nervous or that looks very critical. You will get nervous by watching this person in the audience, and if you don't have a strategy to get back to your comfort zone, that really can provoke a blackout or at least a mistake. So if you want to do that, you must be sure that your fingers will find a way on their own using the muscle memory. A different advantage is what I call the so-called focused relaxation. And that means I'm not that good at improvising. I do it, but my brain is very actively working, and with the time, I feel that I run out of energy if I have to think all the time. If there's passages where my fingers find their ways just on their own, I can relax my brain, I can enjoy to lean back, meanwhile I continue to play, and this focused relaxation helps me to get inspired for new moments where I have my brain more involved. I always want to hold this balance between thinking a lot or thinking ahead and simply letting go and enjoying the moment on the stage. So after we discuss these advantages of the muscle memory, let me show you a couple of dangers that you don't want to run into. And let's start with a little story. I told you I didn't have problems performing songs by memory until I was, I think, 15 or 16. And my first blackout was when we had a concert in a church with our high school. So a lot of people that knew me in this church, huge pressure situation because I wanted to play well for all my fellows at school. And I remember that a cello player was just playing before me. I was sitting in the second row of the church, and with my bellows closed, I moved my fingers and I played that Scarlatti sonata that I was going to perform. And doing this, I suddenly found out that somewhere on the second page, there's a passage where I don't know what my fingers have to do. All the rest was fine, my fingers found the way, but then there was this passage. It never happened before when I practiced, but in this moment I thought about it and I didn't remember what to do. So I was a little nervous, I entered the stage, I played the first part of the song with the repetition, everything was perfect, and then I reached exactly that passage and I had a blackout. So my fingers didn't do what was right, I played a couple of mistakes, and I somehow made it to a final chord and I finished the song. Some people in the audience didn't even realize, but I was very frustrated because I had to stop the song before I came to the end, and I didn't know what to do else. I haven't been able to improvise over this passage. I couldn't think of another passage later in that piece of music. So I simply had to stop, play a final chord, and leave the stage. And this experience was horrible for me. I sat down at home and I thought, what do I have to do different so that this is not going to happen again? And until then, I have played whole concerts of 90 minutes of music only with my autopilot, only with the muscle memory. I never thought about it. I was always confident because it always went well. But suddenly, when I was 15 or 16, I started thinking and I was scared to death. So I was looking for new strategies. I asked my teacher about ways to get along with this. I studied music theory. I started to analyze songs in different ways. I tried out stuff, and very soon I realized that I can insert little trigger points, and these trigger points will guide me through what I have already established in autopilot mode. After that happened, I realized that I can even practice more efficient if I don't always practice for finger memory and autopilot, but if I insert these trigger points earlier, and if I practice more with analytical understanding and my ears. So I was very lucky that this happened when I was already in a playing routine and I already knew that I wanted to be a musician and that I can do it. But just imagine if it happened earlier, I had this blackout when I was 8 or 9, I would probably have stopped my musical career because I thought I can't do it. So if I would send somebody to the stage, I would really check as a teacher that the performance is secured enough and that a student practiced with different strategies and really has enough trigger points to jump back or jump forward in a performance and the whole performance is secured. We'll talk about how to do that. Another huge danger, which I also experienced and I suffered from it a lot, is your autopilot that wants to play faster than your brain can control. Now this is interesting. I always say fast fingers are a blessing, but they are also very dangerous. If you practice all your songs to finger memory and your fingers are fast, if you get nervous, you will probably perform with 10% more speed. That's what people usually say, 10%. With 10% more speed than you wanted to play when you practice. And your fingers can do it. However, your brain maybe can't follow this speed. And from my experience, if I get nervous, it's way more than 10%. I remember that I played an international competition in Castelfidardo, and I was so nervous. I played everything incredibly fast. If I watch these videos now, I'm ashamed of this performance. I couldn't even play it that perfectly again. I hit all the right notes, everything was perfect in terms of technique, but there was no more music in it, and I didn't even realize it. I never intended this performance to be that fast and technically exposed. However, I got nervous and my fingers simply did their thing, and I haven't been able to stop them because there was only the autopilot and there was no way to control this finger speed. So music to me is not just an artistic act like in a circus, and it's a pity if you practice something beautifully and just because you get nervous and your autopilot does its own thing, you lose the beauty of music and you appear like somebody who just wants to play fast, and well, the audience immediately thinks that's a show off. He only wants to show us how quickly he can move his fingers, but maybe you didn't even intend that. That's one of the dangers, practicing too much into muscle memory. Fourth disadvantage is muscle memory can provoke a blackout. And how this happens is muscle memory is not prepared for thinking. As long as you don't think about the performance, as long as you're in your comfort zone, like you're practicing at home, there's no one listening, you just let go, you play a song, you feel, yeah, I'm good, I can do it. Nothing will happen as long as you're in that comfort zone. But as soon as you start thinking, remember that story from the church at high school, or as soon as you're standing on the stage and something, the light, the audience, something distracts you, you run a high risk of running into a blackout. Why that? It's not possible to not think. So if I tell you not to think of a green elephant dancing in your bed, you will think about a green elephant dancing in your bed in this very moment. And the same is with playing music. Now, you cannot think about something if you actively think about something different. If I give you a mathematical exercise and I tell you to think of this elephant, then probably your brain is still involved with that mathematical thinking and this picture won't be as lively. So there's a lot of layers in music that you can focus on. One layer is, for example, the dynamics. One layer could be your body movement, characters in the music. There's thousands of possibilities what to focus on. And if you practiced these layers and you practiced thinking of these layers and actively following them, then you have the possibility to jump between these layers and bringing your focus back to the music you're playing in this moment. Say someone in the audience is very critical and you realize, wow, I'm getting afraid because this person looks so serious. If you focus on this person, you will get afraid more and more. However, if you go back to music and you think of, oh, what do I want to do with the dynamics? What is the next character? Oh, I have to play as lovely as I can. In that moment, you will forget about that person and you can distract yourself from the distraction. Distract yourself from the distraction. That's a good thing. And you're only able to do that if you practice jumping between these layers and following these layers, which you normally don't do when you practice only to muscle memory. And the fifth huge danger of the muscle memory is a very superficial engagement in the music. That's somehow related with playing too fast. You probably know these players who are only focused on learning the right notes as quickly as they can and playing through a song as quickly as they can, but that aren't so much interested in the interpretation of music. If you secure that layer and you're able to hit the right notes, if you're a very good player, maybe you'll find the correct interpretation just in that very moment on stage. It can happen because you have the capacity to think about that. But if you're distracted from it, and if it doesn't happen, and you're so much dependent on your impulsive intuition of that moment, if it doesn't happen, you deliver a non-musical, boring interpretation. And that's a pity, because maybe you missed the musical core of a piece of music. If, however, you practice more with listening to your music and analyzing your music, you will think more about all these things that make an interpretation lively and beautiful. And of course, when playing, you will reconstruct what you practiced, and the audience enjoys following this process more than just listening to a pure technical performance. Advantages, dangers. Third point, application fields. I usually apply the autopilot to short modules in music, and I'll show you all these things in a minute on the accordion. Short modules can be passages which are one direction of movement, say 5 fingers in a sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or one fast run in one direction, or even a series of same movements that you can put into one unity. I always want to condense music to modules so that I don't have to think as much. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite songs for explaining musical theory is the Rondo alla Turca by Mozart. And the introduction sounds like this. Now, there's a lot of notes in this introduction, but it's also only a couple of modules. The first module, for example, is this. And then this module is repeated in different positions on your keyboard. Same module again. Same module again. Here is why I say it's always the same module. We're in A minor, white keys only, and the higher notes are scale notes from A minor, and the lower note is always a chromatic halftone step. Same here. Same here. So theoretically analyzed, this is one module. Looking at my finger movement, it also is only one module because my fingers turn around in the wrist movement. I overdo it now, I wouldn't play that way. But I turn my wrist in this direction and back. Again, again, 2 times. You saw an example of a theoretical analysis and a movement-based analysis, which both support that there is a module that you can save to your autopilot. So what I would do is, programming my fingers for autopilot mode usually is something that has nothing to do with rhythm. It's only about the correct movement. So I start slowly, I play this module, and I try to program it into my fingers by getting faster. I always want to make sure that I'm able to play everything perfect. As soon as you play it with a mistake, you program that mistake into your fingers, and that is what happens a lot of times. But if you focus on a little module, you have a less risk of programming that perfect mistake. So I'm always very involved with playing perfect and bringing that module to that maximum speed where my fingers feel like they are able to play that. Then, after I practiced all these modules, I want to focus on the trigger points, which are the links between these different modules. This. So I'll accent it a little and I'll focus on hitting the right note, which is the trigger point to initiate this circular movement of my wrist. One. Like this. More about the practicing way later, but this is to give you an impression of what a module is and how to apply it when you program something into your muscle memory. You can apply this to whole bravuras, to difficult passages, to everything where your fingers don't stop moving. If you apply it to slow music, it's not hard to imagine that your brain will start thinking too much and you're out of this comfort zone of simply moving your fingers. Another application field is music with, for example, polyphonic structures, where it's simply not comfortable to think of everything at once. In general, it's impossible, I think, to think of everything that happens in music at once. So you always have a couple of things that are automated. And if you have polyphonic music, you probably automate, for example, the left hand, which is the second voice, and you're able to focus more on the beauty of the right hand when you perform it. There's a ton of examples, and the easiest example for all standard bass players is the polka pattern for the left hand. We have played that so many times that it's a perfect autopilot, and we don't have to focus on playing that movement anymore. We only have to know the position, where to play it, and our fingers will find the way to execute this movement of polka alternating bass in perfection. This is because we've played it so many times that we made it to that layer of subconsciousness of autopilot. If you apply the right strategies, in a moment, you will be able to automate all kinds of patterns and all kinds of musical things. It can also be the dynamic layer, it can also be articulation in a song. Everything that you want to automate, you can automate. Now practicing. There is a general rule for practicing things so you're able to play them in autopilot mode, and that is you need a high number of repetitions with a fast execution. Once again, high number of repetition means you do the same thing a lot of times in sequence. Hours later. Then you execute it as fast as possible. You always want to play perfect, but as soon as you're able to play it perfect, forget about the rhythm, just play it as fast as you can hit these notes. That's how you would practice it, to program your fingers. And this is also something about playing and exercising scales. So if there's a piece with a scale, for your muscle memory, it's not important to play that in 8th notes or 16th notes. The only important thing is to know where the scale transitions from this position into that position. So what I would practice is I would focus on this link where my thumb has to find the new position, and I would focus on finding the right position for my fingers, and I would do that as fast as I can. That's more efficient to practice scales than to practice it that way. Not if you want to play it with a certain clarity or rhythm, but in general, just to find the right keys, it's more efficient. And if you're interested on a tutorial about scales, please post it in the comments and I can do a tutorial on scales too. Scales are something that I think is important, but not that important as most people think. But just to open a little bracket here, you have to exercise scales correctly, so it really serves your musicality and it's not just a waste of time. High number of repetitions with a fast execution. One of the consequences is you need short modules. You can't make it to a high number of repetitions if you play the whole song through until you will. This first module again, if you play the whole couple of pages of the Turkish Rondo, the effect is simply gone. Then there is a maximum of 12 repetitions that I would say, after which I would change the exercise. Change the exercise means if your exercise is to play as fast as possible in a perfect manner, after you've done that 12 times, there's no big effect in training it more than 12 times. And it's not only about this number, it's also about when you get bored. And please watch yourself when you realize that you're not thinking about music, you're watching on the window, or you think about different things. That means you're not involved enough and you're probably practicing with boring strategies. If you're not a professional musician and you don't have 5 hours a day to practice, I would recommend to do only 6 repetitions or 8, because 12 is already a lot. And it's more efficient to change the exercise than to stick too long to the same exercise. Changing the exercise could be change the rhythmic pattern. So this is just a flow, no rhythm, it's just flow and pure programming. If I would want to change the exercise, I could give it a swinging rhythm, for example. And I could play that as fast as possible. Do that for 12 times for professionals and change it again. For example, an inverted swinging rhythm. Like this. Or say you hold every second note longer than the others. All these are challenges you can set yourself for the next 12 repetitions of the module that you want to exercise. As soon as you feel the module is already very comfortable, there's no need in practicing it anymore. So if you practice this way, you have a very good control on which modules you want to practice more and which modules are already checked, and you can continue to the next module and the next issue that you have to solve in that piece of music you're currently practicing. That saves such a lot amount of time, because in most of the times, if you play from left top to right bottom of a song, you will play through so many modules that you already know. And remember, we're only talking about practicing for muscle memory now. There is no effect on these individual modules to improve them for your muscle memory. Just bear that in mind. After this general rule of playing not more than 12 repetitions or 6 repetitions, watch yourself for boredom. There is another thing to bear in mind, which I call the trap of playing slowly. It's very good to train with a metronome, and it's very good to practice slowly as long as it challenges you in some kind of musical way. There's a lot of things that you can control when you practice slowly. For example, the layer of key pressure. How deep are you going to press the keys? Are you going to press them all to the bottom of the key, or are you going to play more superficially? Also, when are you going to move your thumb to the next position if you play scales? This is something that you can practice very good slowly. Slow movement of the scale, but fast movement of the important parts. However, if you just play slowly for playing slowly, it will bore the hell out of you, and there won't be a big effect in that. I had a lot of challenges when I was a teen, because I always prepared myself for competitions with what I now consider a little inefficient challenges, like there's a difficult run. If I want to play perfectly at the competition, I set myself the challenge to play it 500 times slowly in sequence, just to have the security that I can play it perfectly in the competition. Now, I know that this wasn't efficient, and it took me 4 or 5 hours to do that for certain runs, and it was very boring. But there's a little psychological side effect that applies to every method of practicing. If you set yourself a challenge and you master this challenge, you go on stage and you know that you deserve to perform perfectly because you worked for it. And doing, for example, this 500 times slowly thing was psychologically good for me, because I knew I did that. I deserved to play perfectly. However, isn't it better if you set yourself challenges that are psychologically worthful and in the meantime efficient? So now I set myself the challenge to do a couple of exercises until I know I can check this module, I'm able to play it, and still I will have the same psychological security once I enter the stage. And this is something that took a little bit of experience, and it was a little bit of wasted time when I practiced as a team. This also was the trap of playing slowly. Not playing slowly just to play slowly, only play slowly when there is things that you want to control in that slow rhythm and when there's things that still challenge you in that slow tempo. If it doesn't challenge you, increase the tempo, go to a different exercise. Same with the metronome. It's very good to exercise with the metronome if you have goals that can be trained with the metronome, like consistency in the tempo or feeling, playing a little bit laid back, playing ahead of the metronome, all these kinds of things. Very good exercises. But if you just want to learn a piece of music by heart and you want to program it to your muscle memory, the metronome doesn't serve you very well. When I was exercising for these 500 times as a teen, I experienced that I distracted myself oftentimes just out of boredom. So if my little brother would play a video game, I was watching him while I exercised different runs, and I realized that this strategy can be good if you want to program your autopilot, and I found an explanation for that. The autopilot means that you want to program something into your subconscious layer in the brain. That means the conscious layer in your brain will be involved with different things. For example, the beauty of the interpretation of your music. As soon as I'm able to perform a module in perfection with an exercise, I can start to distract myself from the exercise. For example, I could watch TV while I practice that exercise. Or I could start to talk while I speak, walk around in the room, move parts of my body, or all different things to be sure my conscious brain is involved with different things. This is dangerous because you have to go back to a control mode every then and now, not to make that perfect mistake. If you get sloppy in the execution with what you're practicing, so I would only do it for say 10 or 20 times with distracted brain, and after this I would check if I still perform the exercise correctly. However, distractions on purpose can help you a lot to get something programmed into your fingers. Something that seems to be a contradiction to what I just said also helps you to program a sequence of modules into your subconscious autopilot, and that's playing through in this time. Playing through kind of sets a frame for the song, and it connects different modules. So if you know the modules and you want to connect them, playing through is a good exercise. But I'm very carefully with playing through. Playing through usually is if I want to control, if I'm able to play that song already, or if I want to play a passage of the song. If I realize I make mistakes or I'm not able to play it by memory, I won't play it through another time. I will start exercising different modules again and connecting them, and later controlling again if I can play it through. Playing through a song is what I consider a treat to myself. If I deserved to play through a song because I practiced enough. And what I usually do is I play through songs where I'm sure that I can play them in nearly perfection because I already practiced them enough. If I play through a song that is still under construction, that's very counterproductive, and I would exercise perfect mistakes, or, well, it's simply not very beneficial for constructing this song. So I play through songs where I have exercised in all these different ways, and I feel it's a treat to be able to play these songs and to deserve playing them very well. Playing through and exercising, that's two different things for me, and I cannot stress the importance of this difference. Finally, for practicing passages for your autopilot mode, trigger points are really essential. In the beginning of a module, I usually have a trigger point, and that trigger point initiates a movement for my fingers, where my fingers, after I practiced it, will find the right way. That means instead of thinking of many notes, I just think of the trigger points. So here again is the Turkish rondo, where I have these modules in a row, but the trigger points are in fact the chord tones of A minor. I play around all these chord notes, and I set also a manual trigger point by hitting a little out of the wrist. That's what I theoretically think. First tone, root of A minor, play around it and go to the next note, third in A minor. Next trigger point, hit it again and play around the third in the same way. Then I reach the fifth of this chord and I play around the fifth. So now I don't think of these, in this case, 12 notes. I think of 3 notes. I think of the first, 1, 2, 3. That gives me speed, it gives me control, and it helps me not to run into a blackout situation, because suddenly I have to think less. And what I think is easier theory than all the little details which I programmed into autopilot mode. So much for the first video of this series on playing by memory. I hope you enjoyed. Give me feedback on how these strategies work for yourself. Give me feedback on what you discovered for yourself, if you found yourself applying certain strategies unconsciously or consciously, and if something helps you to think different about playing music by heart so far. I hope you enjoyed this video on learning songs by heart. This was part 1 out of 3 on the autopilot. If you're also interested in analytically reconstructing songs and playing songs by ear, which makes a very powerful combination to know all these 3 together and how they work together, these 2 videos are available for members of the online academy. So take a look at the website. Maybe you're interested in the courses and the downloads for digital accordion worksheets and tutorials on all kinds of skills and songs. I'd like to see you soon. Bye bye.